certainly got a great deal of creativity from both my parents, but particularly from my mother.
Difficult time during the teenage years, but I really thoroughly enjoyed her as an adult and a friend.
What kind of self-talk do we use to avoid making these same mistakes with our children?
Brody, when you get old enough to start rebelling against your parents, just remember no matter what happens, they'll always love you.
Welcome to On the Go with AAUW. Our program today is Mothers and Daughters. We will explore the mother-daughter relationship with two social workers. And then later on in the show, we'll hear from some mothers and daughters that are here with us today. I'd like to introduce our social workers, first of all. To my left is Jody Tompros. And Jody, what do you do as a social worker?
Well, I'm a family counselor with Northern Virginia Family Service, and I'm at Herndon High School in the RAP program, where I work with adolescents and families. And I'm also with a part-time with a group called Life Transitions, where I do private practice work, working with couples and families and children.
Okay. And to Jody's left is Sue Garrett. And Sue, what do you do as a social worker?
I have a private practice in Alexandria, and I do a lot of work with adolescents and young adults and families. I have a particular interest in the emotional ramifications of learning disabilities. I also work part-time for an organization that provides psychological services to the elderly.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I always think about with mother-daughter relationships are the ups and downs in the relationship. And it seems like our relationship with our daughters might go in phases or periods. And do professionals actually recognize that there are certain periods or phases that this relationship goes through?
Sure. I think mothers and daughter relationship is particularly powerful because daughters don't separate from moms like boys do to align with their dads. So the mom is a role model for the daughter and not having to separate at any time. So when separation comes, it's particularly a struggle.
And when does separation come?
Well, initially it starts probably around 4, and but it works its way up to adolescence is a particularly tumultuous time. But it really depends on the mother and the daughter. Moms usually have certain goals in mind for their daughters, and what starts the tumultuous time is usually fear-based because moms have goals for their daughters. There's also a fear of loss of love and a fear of loss of power. And so when those things enter into it, that's when the struggle begins. And you either work through it or you don't.
Actually, I'm very surprised to hear that the separation starts as early as 4. I'd always thought that it began during the teen years, the time when you always hear that there's a lot of conflict, you know, between the mother and the daughter. And so that's very interesting that it does begin as early as 4 years old.
Actually, Ruth, it's the young infant who is learning to crawl is really doing the very beginnings of the work in separating from mother. And if you watch the child at first, the child will not leave the room where mother is, but basically crawls around and stays very close to mother, and frequently will check back to see that mother's still watching or whatever, and then gradually gets braver and braver, and then the child will attempt to leave the room, and again, it's a practicing kind of phase, and then he'll come back to sort of refuel, so to speak, and make sure that mother is still there, and it's an incremental process. And if ideally the first successful separation, albeit not a complete one because it's a very young child, takes place right around the age of 3.5 to 4. Ultimately, again, it varies with the child, but that's, you know, and at that point, the child is then ready to think about separating from mother to go to school. So that's the first.
I hadn't thought of it in those terms. I'd forgotten about having to separate for school. I keep thinking about separation in terms of being an adult and leaving home and leaving mother and going out and starting your own life. Why is it that there seems to be so much conflict during the teen years? Is this separation process speeded up at that time then, or you know, what is the cause of the conflict?
Well, there are a number of reasons. I think teen years, and when you think of mothers and daughters and you think of areas that there would be conflict, one of the obvious areas is competition for father and competition for the attentions of father. And there are certain times in the developmental cycle where this is thought to play more of a part, but it pretty much is an ongoing process. Pretty much through a lifetime. It's thought of as being resolved somewhat when the daughter marries, but I think to some extent it goes on all the way through life, perhaps until the father's death, or
and mother's death.
And mother's death, yes, good point.
Yes.
But it's that would be one area of conflict that is perhaps not always evident to us as mothers or daughters, but it's there, and I think if we think about it, we recognize that there.
And if you think about competition, not just with dad, but just competition in general, like a daughter wants her mom's attention, and daughters really want mom's approval. Depending where moms are, whether they're professional moms or whether they're stay-at-home moms, there's jealousy. You know, do daughters get to do things that mom didn't get to do, or is mom really, really terrific at what she does, and daughters don't feel like they can live up to that. And again, mothers and daughters, there are these knots, you know, that daughters and mothers have these invisible threads that really connect them in a very special way. And if they don't, there are these knots that, you know, that's, again, really fear-based. And if moms are the role models and the nurturers, and daughters look to moms for the answers. Moms don't always have all the answers. And daughters aren't always going to do what mom wants them to do.
Yes.
I mean, daughters have their own ideas, and it's a different generation, and they have gifts that, depending on what the mother, you know, moms may have sort of a box that they want to put, they have certain ideas that they, or they have dreams that they might not have met, that they want their daughters to live up to, and so it's just, you know, becomes prickly. There's a really interesting mother-daughter team that says that the role of mom is to become a graduate, a mother graduate, and the daughter becomes sort of it's an ex-mom and a daughter graduate, so that you get to a certain place in life where you're peers, and you both bring your own wisdom to the relationship. But that takes a lot of work.
Yes.
And it takes a lot of courage on the part of both to be vulnerable and to be able to say, you know, I don't know, and to be wrong.
I think it does take a lot of courage on the mother's part, being a mother, to let go of the daughter and let the daughter be.
It's probably easier in the relationship if mom can let go, because then it doesn't make the struggle so hard.
Well, I think we've set the stage, so to speak, for introducing our mothers and daughters that are here with us on the show. And they've come with some questions to ask of Jody and Sue. So why don't we go ahead and move into this part of the show and have the mothers and daughters.
Why do mothers get so upset when daughters don't do things the same way that their mothers do?
Well, there are a number of reasons why that could be. I think, in general, if a mother finds herself feeling extremely upset that her daughter is not doing things as she did, it's scary, it's threatening. Chances are her mother had difficulty accepting her as an individual and accepting her as maybe doing things differently. So it's kind of what feels right. It's kind of the way it was for her, and that separation process hasn't taken place completely enough with her own mother, so that she feels threatened if daughter is thinking differently. The whole process between mothers and daughters, the separation process, is difficult because there is a sense of mother and daughter being connected, and the sense of the nurture. The mother is the nurturer and the daughter depending on that. So
there's also a safety in which mom knows how to do things. And if it works for her, she really, more than anything, moms want to protect their daughters from being hurt. So if she hasn't ever done it a different way, she gets scared when you do it a different way.
I was going to say that when I lived at home with my mother for 1 year, when my husband was away overseas, I was again the daughter at home, and I wasn't doing things the way that my mother wanted me to do them. I had developed my own ways because I was married and I had a child by that time, so there was a little bit of conflict there at that time. And I guess I wish I would have had the wisdom to, accept that a little bit more graciously at that time, although it was a wonderful year that we did spend together.
I think there's a tolerance that needs to develop on both sides. The mother for the child realizing that the child needs to become his or her, in this case, her own person, and allowing her to do that, being able to tolerate the rebellion of the teenager or whatever it is, or even of the 4-year-old who says, I'm going to wear what I want to wear.
That still happens at 21.
Okay, is there another mother or daughter that has a question?
What have you all found, I guess, in your practices and involvement in the RAP program, is that correct, RAP program, that are the biggest issues between mothers and daughters? I certainly know we had ours.
I think each mother-daughter relationship has their own issues, but it's really around, power and, not wanting to give up power, or the issues specifically are individual, but the sort of general issues are not wanting to give up power, not being afraid that one of the other's not going to love you, and again, if mom has certain goals, or if daughter, I know that for me, in thinking that my mother was omnipotent and that she should know everything, now I'm a mom and I don't know everything, and I mean, it could be as little as not liking what you wear, to not liking your hair, to expecting you to, be a teacher versus if you wanted to be an engineer. I mean, the issues are depending on the individual mom and daughter couple.
So probably power-based.
Power-based, love-based, and goal-based.
Power and maybe another word that's very close to that would be the control, again, feeling. And it's, I agree with what you're saying.
Moms have control for a really long time, and it's their job. And the control is really based on protection, and so to have to give up the control and is saying, I trust you to go out into this world. This is a hard world. So it's hard to give up that when you've had those experiences. Nobody wants to see their kid get hurt.
So how do we keep from making these same mistakes, these generational mistakes? What kind of self-talk do we have with ourselves? How do we get over that?
You can say things to yourself like, I don't know what your spiritual base is, but one of them is, asking your higher power to make sure that your kid is protected, to say that I've done my job. If you've taught your daughter well, and if you've taught her to be independent and you've given her the skills of life, you just have to trust, because she could walk across the street and be hurt. There's just, releasing control is a really hard thing to do.
I have something to say about that.
All right.
Sue was a wonderful daughter. She was 12 when her father died, and there were 5 siblings. And if Sue hadn't have been the character she is, I'd have never made it. But we have a nice family. The important thing, I think, starting children out is with rules that can last through life, like being honest.
Values.
And,
Absolutely.
and a good sense of values, and that you can pass on from generation to generation, and it's not happening in too many homes today. I'm sure you run across it.
Parents are afraid to take responsibility and give their kids rules. They're afraid that they won't be loved. They're afraid that their kids won't fit in. And the best thing that you can do for your child up until a certain age is give them rules to live in your house by. Absolutely.
Okay, I have a question. I'm an at-home mother. My mother was an at-home mother. She was very talented. She's an artist, did everything, and she was a great creator. But I kind of look at her thinking, I wish she had gone on with her career. And I feel I'm an at-home mother right now. Is this good for Brody? Is she going to look at me like I look at my mother, wishing that she had done something more with her life other than staying home and being an artist?
Well, I'm not sure I completely understand your question. You feel as if your mother would have been more fulfilled had she not been at home?
I think I would have had a better role model had she gone on and had a career. Because I went on and had a career and was not successful at it, didn't really want to have a career. I still really don't want a career. I like being at home.
I think you should do what feels right for you. And if you have that option, I say be at home and be, you know, I don't think you don't have to be at home to be a good mother. I don't believe that. But I think that that's what works for you. And I'm certain that for Brody, right now she's used to seeing you at home, having you at home, and when she goes to school, you'll be there. And my sense is that you will, as Brody grows, you will find yourself changing and maybe then feeling the need to move out. But sounds like you're very happy with where you are, and I wouldn't change that.
Just from personal experience, she stayed home until I was in 2nd grade and my brother was in 1st grade, and then went back to work part-time and was home in the evenings for us. And then she didn't go back to work full-time until we were old enough to come home by ourselves and take care of ourselves in the afternoon.
And that worked for you?
Yeah, it's just, you know, I mean, obviously each situation is going to be different.
Well, one thing
moms have the opportunity to be home and enjoy being home. I think that you can't ask for anything better. I think if moms are home and they don't like to be home, if they're bored at home and they're not particularly good at a certain stage with kids pick up on that. You know, if you're not happy being home and you worked, and she was in a child care situation where she was having fun and learning to create and being with other kids, that would be what would be best for her. But if you're at home and you two are having a good time at it, there can't be anything better than the nurturing that you're giving her.
In your relationships, in your practices, what have you found mothers and daughters have enjoyed doing the most together?
It's again, it's really an individual kind of thing. My reaction, I want to say shopping, but you know, I mean, I really can't say there isn't one thing in particular that they enjoy doing together. It's who are they individually as people, and then, you know, what do they have in common? I know that some mothers and daughters don't have much in common, and lots of times when a child is brought into the family, that gives them something to love and something in common, which will then, it's a wonderful sort of a bridge or a mending period. Other times it's not necessarily that. It can, again, bring up the power struggle, but
in your counseling, do you find that mothers and daughters are happy?
I think they're in different stages. Some of them are, and some of them are still working at it.
I'll say, right. I would say that frequently the problems, because people don't come to me or it's come to us unless there's some difficulty.
Right.
Frequently the crises with women, particularly adolescent and young adult women or their mothers, has to do with the separation and the fact that that's not, that the boundaries aren't clear in the relationship. One is feeling for the other, it feels fuzzy, it feels uncomfortable, there's anger, there's resentment, and it doesn't feel right, and that's frequently what brings people into therapy. And so
you might want to clarify what we mean by boundaries. You know, boundaries is the sort of invisible line is what belongs to the daughter in her space and her ideas and her responsibilities and what belongs to the mom. And culturally in the United States, we talk about, you know, if I think about it on a continuum, on one end of the continuum, you think about total enmeshment, and then there are cultures where, you know, moms talk for daughters and they do things for daughters and they don't give them the individuality, and then on the other extreme, they're so totally separate that they aren't in contact with each other. And depending on the couple, depending on the mother and the daughter and the family, sort of the heritage and the culture, you define what's comfortable for you. And so you find interests together, but the boundaries are sort of the invisible definition of who the moms and the daughters are. Can you say that clearer?
Well, generally speaking, I think it has to do with when the boundaries or my space and your space, it's not necessarily mutually exclusive. That is to say, I'm all here and you're all there. There can be a little bit of overlapping if you think of concentric circles, but I think it has to do with when there is too much overlapping. There tends to be, the daughter tends to experience herself as sort of a collection of reactions to mother and not much else. And the quote separation has to do with becoming her own person and being able to react and respond because of her own needs, her own feelings, wants, rather than mother's. So if that clears it up at all, I don't know.
Could I ask Brody a question? She hasn't had a chance.
I think that's a good idea.
Brody, do you want to tell us what it's like, what you and your mom do all day? Do you like it?
How about the mic? Right.
What did we do?
I don't know.
Well, what did you do today before you came to the studio?
We went grocery shopping together. And
Do you want to tell her about how we like to garden together and collect the worms?
I like doing when me and Mommy go gardening, but it's still no and sometimes I just don't do stuff without her.
Okay.
Thank you, Brody. I was wondering if there's a stage that comes after separation. I was thinking again of the year that I spent with my mother, and it seemed that at that time, that year, it was the time of my life when I came to appreciate my mother the most. Now that I was a mother, and I knew everything that she had gone through, then I became closer to her. So it was kind of like I separated, but then I zoomed back in and became close again to her. So is that another sort of stage or phase that this relationship goes through?
Well, it's what I call the ex-child and the mother graduate stage. When the daughter doesn't walk into the room and the mom says something to her and she immediately becomes 7 years old. You know, that mom can say something to you and it's like a peer saying something to you.
Yes.
I think it's the acceptance that mother finally coming to terms with the fact that mother isn't Donna Reed. And that's okay. And really to be a good enough mother, speaking of the daughter being as the mother, you really have to accept yourself as having been a good enough daughter to begin with. So there's that coming to terms with whatever my mother's expectations for me were, they were her expectations. And it's okay for me to be who I am, but it is a process.
Okay, thank you. That was very good. Well, we've been talking with mothers and daughters about being mothers and daughters and about getting along with each other, and also about, I think, valuing this very special relationship. Is there anything that you can add that we haven't talked about that you think might be a good thing, Sue and Jody?
Well, communication is very important. When all else fails, sit down and try to talk in terms of what you're experiencing and feeling. Avoid attacking wherever possible, and that's not always easy, and sometimes you got to start that way. But communication, iMessages is good. But not I think you're being stubborn.
I feel.
It's I feel. I feel messages. And the other thing would be sense of humor. Keep your sense of humor. When all else fails, remember that this is not supposed to go real well all the time, and if it is, believe it or not, there's something wrong.
Value each other. Value each other. You both come together with a lot of wisdom, and you need to listen. You really need to hear each other, not just react. Just really listen to what the other one is saying, and value. I mean, really think that you're valuable human beings and that you're both making a contribution.
Thank you, Jody, and thank you, Sue, for sharing your insights and your expertise with us. And thank you, you wonderful mothers and daughters, for sharing your thoughts with us. It's been very good having you here with us tonight. Thank you.